I became a mother to a child I didn't give birth to. My sister Vanessa walked away to chase her dream life, leaving me with a diaper bag and a cold ultimatum from our parents. For 18 years, I was the ghost in the background, the one who sacrificed everything while she played pretend in the city. But today is graduation. Vanessa just walked into this crowded hall in a silk dress, holding a designer gift, ready to claim a son she doesn't even know. She thinks she's the star of the show, but she's about to find out that history isn't written by the people who show up for the photo. It's written by the ones who stayed. My life didn't end with a bang. It ended with the sound of a tea kettle whistling at 2 in the morning. I was 22, 3 weeks away from starting a master's program on a full ride, with my suitcase practically packed and my future looking like a sunrise. Then came the phone call. My mother's voice was like ice, no greeting, just a command to come home immediately. When I walked into that kitchen, the air felt heavy, like a storm was trapped inside the four walls. My father was staring at a spot on the linoleum floor, his arms crossed tight. My sister, Vanessa, was 16 then. She was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone as if she were waiting for a bus, not deciding the fate of a human life. In the center of the table sat a single ultrasound photo. "The neighbors cannot know," my mother whispered. That was her first concern. Not Vanessa's health, not the baby, but the reputation of the Summers name in a town where gossip is the only currency. They laid out the plan like a business merger. Vanessa would go to a private school in Boston to reset. The baby would be born in secret. And then they turned to me. "You're staying, Elena," my mother said, pushing a yellow folder toward me. "You'll take the baby. You're stable. You're reliable. You'll say he's yours from a brief mistake in college." I looked at Vanessa, waiting for a spark of motherly instinct, a tear, anything. She just looked up and shrugged. "I have school, Elena. I have a life." In that moment, the yellow folder felt like lead. If I said no, they'd send him to a state agency by Friday. If I said yes, my dreams died. I looked at the ticking clock, 11 minutes past 2, and realized my life was no longer mine. The transition from a graduate student to a mother happened in the space of a single signature. While Vanessa was settling into her dorm in Boston, I was settling into a life of permanent exhaustion. My master's scholarship was gone, replaced by a grueling schedule of back-to-back shifts. I worked as a grocery clerk from dawn until 2, then spent my evenings as a janitor at the local community center. Money wasn't just tight, it was non-existent. I remember Leo's first Christmas. He was barely 6 months old, and I didn't have $5 to spare for a roll of shiny wrapping paper. I took the Sunday comics from a discarded newspaper at the library and wrapped a small plastic rattle in the brightly colored ink. I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment and cried, watching him rip the paper with a gummy smile. He didn't know we were poor, but the weight of it nearly crushed me every single day. My parents remained true to their word. They kept the secret, which meant they kept their distance. They didn't want the mistake visible at their dinner table. And Vanessa? She was a ghost. She never sent a card. She never asked if he was crawling, if he was teething, or if he was healthy. To her, Leo was a chore she had successfully delegated to me. The hardest moment came when Leo turned 4. He found a photo of Vanessa in an old box, her graduation picture from high school. He pointed his small, sticky finger at her face and asked, "Mom, who is this pretty lady? Why doesn't she come to my birthday?" I had to look into those innocent eyes and lie. I told him she was a busy aunt who lived far away. But as I tucked him in that night, I realized the cruelty of the golden child dynamic. Vanessa was off earning her MBA, her hands clean and her sleep uninterrupted, while I was scrubbing floors to buy him milk. I wasn't just raising a child. I was protecting a woman who didn't even care if we were alive. For 18 years, the silence from Boston was the only thing I could count on. But as Leo's high school graduation approached, the atmosphere changed. I was busy checking the fit of his cap and gown when the front door of our modest home swung open without a knock. There stood Vanessa. She looked like she had stepped off the cover of a magazine. Her emerald silk dress shimmered, her hair was a perfect auburn wave, and on her arm was Harrison, a man whose watch likely cost more than my car. She didn't look at me with gratitude. She looked around my living room with a faint expression of pity, as if she were visiting a charity case. "We're here for the big day," she announced, her voice polished and loud.
She didn't ask how I was.
She walked right up to Leo, who was standing by the kitchen table, and pulled him into a suffocating hug. "Look at you. You have your mother's eyes," she chirped, casting a performative glance at Harrison. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to play a role. Over dinner, which she insisted on hosting at the most expensive bistro in town, she spent the entire time rewriting history. She told Harrison stories about her difficult sacrifices and how complicated family logistics forced her to stay away while she built a future for her son. Every time I tried to speak, to mention the nights I spent awake with Leo's fevers or the 2 jobs I worked to pay for his braces, she would cut me off with a patronizing pat on the hand. "Elena was such a help," she told Harrison, smiling like a queen acknowledging a loyal peasant. "She was the best nanny a sister could ask for. I truly don't know how we would have managed the childcare without her." The nanny. 18 years of motherhood reduced to a job title. I looked at Leo. He was quiet, his face a mask of polite indifference, but I saw his hand tighten around his water glass. Vanessa thought she could buy 18 years of love with a designer gift and a weekend of acting. She had no idea that Leo had stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. The morning of graduation, the air was thick with more than just humidity. The gymnasium was packed, a sea of folding chairs and expectant families. I found my seat in the 3rd row, but Vanessa didn't join me. She insisted on standing near the graduate entrance, positioning herself where the professional photographers couldn't miss her. She was clutching a massive white box, a custom bakery cake that cost more than my monthly utility bill. In bold, pink frosting, it read, "Congratulations from your real mom." As the processional began, Vanessa didn't just clap. She made a scene. When Leo's name was called, she let out a piercing shriek, waving her designer handbag in the air. She managed to slip past the velvet rope, intercepting Leo just as he stepped off the stage with his diploma. In front of 200 people, she shoved the cake toward him, angling her face so Harrison could capture the reunion on his phone. "I'm so proud of our boy," she cried out, loud enough for the rows behind us to go silent. She reached out to adjust his cap, acting as though she had been the one waking up for 6 a.m. practices and sitting through every flu and heartbreak. I sat there, frozen, feeling the eyes of the community on me, the people who had watched me raise him alone for nearly 2 decades. The insult was calculated. She was trying to rebrand herself in a single afternoon, erasing 18 years of my labor with a frosting-covered lie. I looked at the audience, the neighbors who knew the truth, and the strangers who looked confused. This was her grand finale, the moment she thought she'd officially take back what she had once thrown away. But as she leaned in for a mother-son photo, Leo did something she didn't expect. He didn't smile. He didn't even touch the cake. He looked at her and said, "I think you're in the wrong seat." The gymnasium fell into an uncomfortable, heavy silence as Leo stepped back from Vanessa's reach. He didn't take the cake. Instead, he walked back to the podium, his steps echoing on the hardwood floor. As the valedictorian, he had the final word, and the entire room watched as he pulled a weathered yellow folder from beneath his graduation gown. "I had a speech prepared about the future," Leo began, his voice amplified and steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "But today, someone brought up the past. So, I think it's time we talk about history, the real kind, not the kind written in frosting." He opened the folder. Vanessa's smile faltered, her hand slowly dropping from Harrison's arm. "Inside this folder," Leo continued, "is a document signed 18 years ago. It's a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, sent via fax from a sorority house in Boston. It's signed by a woman who decided that a child would ruin her future. That woman is standing right there in the emerald dress." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Harrison froze, his phone still aimed at the stage, but his expression shifting from pride to pure horror. Vanessa's face went from calculated charm to a ghostly, sickly white. "For 18 years, Leo's voice grew stronger. "I was told She was just busy. But these papers tell a different story. They tell the story of a woman who didn't want to be a mother until it was convenient for her social media feed. And while she was building her dream life, another woman was building mine. He looked directly at me in the third row, his eyes shining with a fierce, protective love. The woman who worked 2 jobs. The woman who wrapped my gifts in newspaper. The woman who sat in every single parent-teacher conference and stayed up through every fever while my real mother didn't even know my phone number. Leo raised the yellow folder high for everyone to see. Biology is an accident, but motherhood is a choice. Vanessa, you chose to walk away. Elena chose to stay. So, if you're looking for a real mom, she's not the one holding the cake. She's the one who's been here the whole time. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Vanessa's designer bag hitting the floor. This stunt hadn't just backfired, it had stripped her bare in front of the one thing she feared most, the truth. The silence in the gymnasium didn't last long. It was replaced by a roar of applause that shook the rafters. It wasn't the polite clapping of a graduation. It was the sound of 200 strangers standing up for the truth. I finally stood too, my legs trembling, as Leo walked off the stage and straight past Vanessa without a second glance. Vanessa reached for Harrison, her voice a frantic, high-pitched whisper. Harrison, he's just emotional. He doesn't understand. But Harrison pulled his arm back as if her touch were toxic. He looked at the yellow folder Leo was still holding, then back at the woman he thought he knew. You told me you were forced to give him up, he said, his voice carrying in the now quieting room. You told me you were the victim. You didn't tell me you faxed away your son to save your social life. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned on his heel and walked out the double doors, leaving Vanessa standing alone next to a melting grocery store cake. My parents tried to intercept us at the exit, my mother's face twisted in embarrassment. Elena, how could you let him do that? The scandal. Leo stepped between us, his stature suddenly seeming much larger than a teenager's. The only scandal was thinking you could replace 18 years of sacrifice with a lie, he said firmly. We walked out into the warm afternoon sun, leaving the golden child and her shattered reputation behind. Vanessa's stunt was designed to give her a perfect moment, but all she got was a public reckoning. As we reached the car, Leo handed me the yellow folder. Let's go home, Mom, he said. And for the first time in 19 years, the weight of that folder felt light. If you believe that being a mother is about